This is Steve Zeltzer with KPFA WorkWeek Radio, and this year is an important victory for workers at Anchor Steam Brewery. They have joined the ILWU and they got a contract, a union contract. So this brewery is the first microbrewery in the country to have a union contract, and it's great that it's with the ILWU. And I'm with two of the brewery workers who were involved in the struggle to get a union here.
I'm Patrick.
My name is Dahlstrom.
So maybe you can first talk about how you came about deciding you needed a union and what that was about.
Well, we actually got pretty much one of the other brewers, he was a tour guide at the time, actually came up and asked us the question one day when we were slow, and they're like, hey, well, what do you think about joining a union? And me and the other bartender that was on, Bridget, we're both just like, yeah, like, what, sign us up, what do we have to do? So from then on, like, we've started that whole process of trying to educate ourselves and educate everybody else that we worked with on the pluses of what being part of a union would be.
Like Patrick said, we're on the bar side of things, so the boys in the brewery all decided to unionize about a year before we did and have been organizing for a long time. So we were late to the table. We found out at maybe a month before the election that this whole union campaign was happening, and it was kind of a scramble, and I was overwhelmed because being a bartender for 12 years, there's no precedent for unionizing. I read through dozens of contracts trying to find any kind of example of a part-time tipped employee unionizing, and I couldn't find any. So I was originally going to vote no. I was really on the fence about it. But then a light bulb went off one day for me, and it was like, if there's no precedent, then let's create precedent. So
make history,
yeah. And then it wasn't like, as soon as I made that decision and I decided to vote yes, it wasn't very much longer where I was like, okay, well, I want to be at the bargaining table. I want to make sure that, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right, because we're not just doing this for our workers at Anchor. We're doing this for all restaurant workers, breweries, industries that have never even imagined what a union would be like for them. We're creating a blueprint of sorts for that. So, and we feel very, very proud about our first contract. We were very fortunate in a lot of ways, and Christmas came early with our ratification vote on December 20th, and everyone, the average employee at Anchor is going to get about an 8% wage increase starting January 1st next week. And in 2021, we're all going to get 3 raises in that year. So on top of PTO for part-timers and time and a half on holidays, which most of us have to work, it's a huge victory. So we're very
when you talk about education, I mean, very few people are in unions these days. I mean, very few young people are in unions. What was the process of education that you went through in deciding you wanted to be in a union, you wanted to be educated about when unions were?
I think a lot of it actually was on the coattails of the teachers unions, because that's around the same time that we went public. And after seeing that and seeing hey, look at what this company is taking away from us, we need to keep our culture alive, and this is the only way that we can do it. We've given in our industry, we're kind of just told you could either take this or you could just go home or find another job. But with a union, then you actually have some protections against it, and that was one of the things that I was trying to educate people on. It's look, this is we're like the middleman now. They can't just take stuff away from us, so they have to bargain with us on it now. And that was one of the bigger things that I was telling people to try and convince them, Blake was one of them, about why this is way more powerful to do it, even though nobody's ever done it before in our industry.
I think that opening up your imagination and creating a visualization for what life could be like, not what life in the past has been like. Like I said, the status quo is we're part-time tipped employees. Like Patrick said, we could be fired any time. We're at-will employees. But imagining a world where you don't have to work 2 jobs. Everyone we work with works 2 jobs, which means they're working 60 to 70 hours a week with no benefits. And that's no way to live, with all the transportation back and forth. So in my mind, I imagined a world where we work 1 job, full-time, bartending, at a livable wage, with benefits. I feel like just creating that imagination and visualizing that for our staff and our team really, really helped.
And a lot of young people feel they have no choice. Even though there's a lot of wealth in San Francisco, the service workers, they're having a tough time of it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our clientele are easily making 6 figures a year, and we have to serve them constantly, and we have to do it with a smile on our face. And we love our job, no doubt about that, and we love doing it. But it is sometimes whenever you see certain people like just flaunt the money, it's kind of just like, sheesh.
And we're getting paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
So it was minimum wage.
We're getting minimum wage. I mean, we get tips, but I mean, it's no way to live off of tips. We're trying to create a living wage in San Francisco.
And that's a real battle.
Yeah, because I mean, your tips don't account for sick time or vacation accrual or bereavement leave. Like, you're not getting any of your tips on those shifts. So we want to be able to live off of our wage minus tips in order to keep our heads afloat in San Francisco and call this city home.
And one of the historic unions in the United States, the ILWU, there was a general strike here in 1934 of the longshoremen. The longshore workers were backing you. What did you learn about the ILWU that made you believe that was the union to go with?
We weren't part of the actual choosing of which union that we wanted to go to. A lot of people were like, well, why didn't you go to Teamsters, because they have a huge market in beer, especially with the micro-breweries. But I guess the people at the brewery, they were doing research. A few of them knew some of the ILWU people, and a lot of them are DSA members. They saw that the ILWU had a more democratic process, and we could make the contract from the ground up. And the militancy and the history of what the ILWU was just felt like a perfect fit for who we are.
Especially being owned by Sapporo, ILWU controls all the ports internationally, and it's being representatives of the union workers, of course. So we saw a lot of power and a lot of solidarity within the longshoremen, and also too throughout the campaign and throughout the contract process, the solidarity that we got from our brothers and sisters at ILWU is so overwhelming. It tickles my soul.
What did they do? What kind of actions did you do to build solidarity? And
you want to tell them about the drink-ins?
Oh yeah, we hosted drink-ins here a few times. First drink-in we did was crazy amazing. We had a whole bunch of different unions come in. I forget, IBEW was there, and they all came in and pretty much took over the bar.
So instead of doing a walkout, we did a drink-in, and it was beneficial for the company because it brought in sales, but it also showed the solidarity and the support and the amount that our San Francisco community is supportive of us on top of our brothers and sisters in ILWU and other unions is so overwhelming. It's amazing. Feels good to be on the right side of history.
And there were posters put up all over the city. And
they're still there.
All over the city, yeah. And especially in this neighborhood, a lot of people were super supportive in this neighborhood. And it's great to see it also at bars too, because we could, pretty much like a blueprint if they want to unionize, depending on where they're at.
And people say, well, the unions, it seems like this year's year of the strike. There have been the teachers' strikes, there have been the Kaiser workers. It seems like workers in this country are starting to rise up and say enough is enough. Do you get that feeling?
Yeah. I mean, not with us. I feel like the whole relationship between us and management has been we've kind of understood each other to not try and go down that route, but if we have to, we will.
So you're ready if it takes it.
Yeah, especially now that we get a huge wage increase in benefits and stuff like that, so people will be able to afford to do it.
And Sapporo, of course, is unionized in Canada, in Japan, all over the world, so this was not the exception.
We would have been the exception if we weren't unionized. One thing I want to top off on that is, like Patrick said, we've been very fortunate. Management has been very accommodating to our needs as workers. They see the benefit of calling themselves union-made beer. When we originally asked them to put a union bug on our beers, we thought it was going to be a big fight, and they were like, oh yeah, we're already working on that. Mm-hmm. So they see the benefit in advertising themselves as union beer. With the strikes, in regards to the strikes, of course we'll be ready to do whatever it takes to represent our workers. But I think on a whole, from my experience being new to the labor movement, is exploding right now. And it's not just strikes. It's people talking about organizing. Like in the next 5-10 years, we are going to see a rise of the middle class, like we did when unions were first formed back in 1934 with the general strike. We are going to see that, and it's not because of strikes. It's because workers are realizing their power, and companies, and the narrative is being changed. And people as a whole want to be on the right side of history, corporations and workers alike. So I think the labor movement is definitely seeing an uptick. I don't know if it's necessarily in strikes, but it's definitely in organizing.
And you talked about democracy and feeling that you had control of what happened here. Did that play a big role in your success?
100%. We took all the things that we like about working at Anchor and put it on paper to make sure that never changes, and we improved in areas that have needed improvement for a long time.
Such as?
Creating a workplace safety committee. That's something we do safety meetings every now and then, but we're going to actually have an official committee that meets quarterly every year. There'll be 3 representatives from the union and representatives from the company to talk about cross-training, talk about bettering the workplace, talk about, there's a lot of projects that never really get done, maintenance issues. So that'll be an opportunity for us to bring our grievances to the table and put our heads together and find solutions, whereas before it would just the fridge would be broken for a year. So it's things like that, creating designated trainers for actual training purposes, so that way everybody knows what their job responsibilities are and how to do them correctly. The shop steward program, which is already built into the union structure as a whole, we're no longer at-will employees, so we have representation through our shop stewards for any kind of disciplinary action or grievances, and creating a system that really, really, really protects our workers against any kind of discipline that's not just cause.
And I know you're the bar workers, you serve the beer. Was there a struggle to make sure that you were in the same union and you had the same contract, because there's separation?
Yeah, there was actually. They wanted to separate us and do a whole completely different contract for us, but we decided to ignore that and act like we were just one whole thing. We had 2 different elections, which they wanted to happen because they thought we would vote no, and we won by 90% yes. So that didn't work out in their favor. But even whenever doing the contract negotiations, we never strayed from this is all one contract. This is all one contract for everybody. There might be little things here and there that are only applicable to brewery workers or to us, which makes sense, but it's all one contract.
And this idea of solidarity, I think that's something the ILWU has built itself on. Yeah,
definitely. The solidarity is something so overwhelming. I said it before, I'll say it again, it tickles my soul. It's, working in the bar, we are the front line of defense for the community and for people coming in who are curious about what we're doing with our union process. And for instance, I had a gentleman during our election campaign who extended his layover by 4 hours to make sure he could take time away from the airport to come in here and have a union beer to support our campaign efforts. And I meet people every day who are just, thank you, we support you. And it's on top of that, and on top of having posters all over the bars, all over the city, on top of all of that, the social media outreach, it's been really great to be on the right side of history.
You made history. How was social media important in your struggle to organize?
It's definitely an important tool. I've never been a huge social media person myself, but we did have one coworker, for instance, who is kind of apathetic. She's younger. She's never really she comes to work, does her job, leaves, didn't really want to be involved or whatnot. And then the week of the actual election campaign, social media blew up on Twitter and Instagram, all about our campaign with support for it. And all of a sudden she is retweeting and like saying like, I'm part of Anchor, and just has this like pride. And that was all because of social media.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also it's great because it pretty much put control back in our hands as controlling our own narrative. Whenever we went public, we already had like 3 or 4 big news media outlets that were ready to go, and we told them drop the story the moment we dropped off the letter, and Anchor was just caught off guard. They didn't know what to do, and that was all because of the people that handled our social media accounts and knew what they were doing.
So you're using this tool actually to help build the real movement and build a success for this thing.
Right.
And it sounds like you had a lot of support in social media.
Mm-hmm. We had a huge amount of support. We actually met
Sarah Nelson?
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah.
Yeah, she came in because she saw us on social media, and like we took a few pictures with her, and she was great. She knows how to drink beer. It's great. She's a super fun person.
And she supports the ILWU struggle to defend the port in Oakland. They want to privatize that port too.
Yes.
So that's a
very vocal supporter.
And it sounds like we're on an optimistic side. That people can change their reality, that young people and the people of this country have a future. You feel more confident about future?
Oh, definitely. Like I've been drinking Anchor Steam since before I could legally drink. So to work for this company like has been amazing, and now that I'm part of actually history with it, with starting a union, I'm honestly hoping that once I have kids, like they'll start working for this company and we'll all be a union family.
I completely agree. I didn't have much experience in labor organizing or unions or anything like that before this experience. And it has been by far the most enlightening and fascinating and exciting adventures that I've ever been on. And it was almost bittersweet to sign that contract because I don't want it to end. But I mean, we've got a long ways to go. The road is not nearly over yet.
And there are a lot of unorganized brewery workers all over the city and all over the country.
I've talked to quite a few brewery workers, not just in the city, but from other parts of the country who have come into our bar, and they're not public yet, so I can't say which, but we all know their names, and they are all looking at organizing because they see what we're doing here, and they want a piece of that same cake.
Up with Anchor Steam and victory your struggle. Thank you for joining us on WorkWeek Radio.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.